Much for joining us for today's session at On24's Checkpoint Summit 2023. My name is Josh Baez, Senior Manager of Corporate Marketing here at On24. So happy that you can all join us today. We are the technology that is powering today's entire event experience. Before we get started, I have a few final reminders for you to get the most out of today's experience. Everything that you see in front of you is customizable, so you can move things around or resize the windows as you need to. Feel free to ask us questions in the Q&A widget down below, and our team behind the scenes will respond to what we can, and we'll also follow up after the event if we don't get to it. And then lastly, you can explore any related resources that you may want to be learning a little bit more about. You can find that below as well. And lastly, please do complete a session survey for us, which you can access from your doc. And if you do, we'll send you a little thank you gift for doing so. But with that out of the way, I am so excited to introduce my guest for today's session at Checkpoint. Joining me today is Amy Holtzman, CMO of CHEQ. Amy, thank you so much for joining me today. Would you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Of course. Thanks so much for having me, Josh. As you mentioned, I'm CMO of CHEQ. I am still fairly new to the CHEQ team. I joined in January of this year. And prior to joining, I was the CMO of Spring Health. I've been in B2B marketing my entire career, which is way too long at this point. But know that I probably share a lot of the same pains and experiences as many of our attendees today. And just a little bit of background on CHEQ. We are the leading go-to-market security platform. We protect more than 15,000 businesses from malicious, automated, and human-driven threats as they do business and go to market online.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Amy. As you were going through that, I'm sure that a lot of our audience today is probably thinking, what does any of that mean? But, you know, that's why we're here. We're here to learn. We're going to learn about some really important things today. The main topic being about invalid traffic. And for many of us, I'm sure, myself included, before Amy, you and I even started discussing this a little bit more, we may not really know what that is and why it's such a problem. I know it sounds like it's bad, invalid traffic. It's probably not a great thing. But we know that this is going to be an increasingly important concern for marketers and business professionals. And so I think that, you know, what we want to talk about today is ways that it can negatively influence things like your funnel, your metrics, your channels, and your performance. And so I think that a great way to kick things off, Amy, if you don't mind, is give us the 101 on invalid traffic. If you could just define and describe the issue of what that is for those who may be less familiar with it.
Of course. So there are a lot of studies out there that examine invalid traffic, and most studies suggest that as much as 40% of the traffic online today is invalid, and most companies classify that, or you know, research firms classify that as anything that is automated, so bots, automation tools, other forms of non-human traffic that typically either help the internet work or help businesses or people do things kind of systematically online. At CHEQ, our business is all about protecting businesses from invalid traffic and allowing businesses to understand invalid traffic. And so we study the traffic that lands on business sites regularly, and we consider anything invalid to be any traffic that lands on your site that doesn't have an ability to convert. And so for us, that can mean human or non-human traffic. It can be benign, suspicious. It could be malicious or have malicious intent. And it can arrive on a business's website for a variety of reasons. It can sometimes be helpful, like crawlers from search engines that help improve SEO. It can be annoying, but not malicious. So it can also be distracting, like bots or human visitors stuffing forms with fake data to gain access to offers, to gated content. It can present competitive risks for businesses. So this comes in the form of scrapers that are designed to periodically grab pricing or product information from your site. It can also be fraudulent, like bots designed to help deplete ad budgets by continually clicking on or loading ads, and it can even be worse. So, you know, it can be bots or human-driven threats designed to take over customer accounts or steal sensitive data. But truly, invalid traffic is present on all sites, and it arrives there for a variety of different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I like the way that you classified it as basically traffic that has no ability whatsoever to convert. Because as marketers, we're always thinking about, not just the form fill, right?
Right.
We're thinking about what happens afterwards. And, I think that, that can really cascade into all of the different processes that you have. And we're going to get into that. I think it's funny that you say that, all websites deal with invalid traffic to some degree or another. And so I think that it's less, and we'll get into this, it's less about preventing it 100%. And it's more about being able to address the issue and make sure that you have the tools and the means to protect and safeguard your data. So that way, if it does happen, you know how to address it and what to do.
Right, absolutely. And you don't, oftentimes you want to understand it, right? You don't want to just block or prevent it, right? Like in the case of crawlers from search engines, typically as marketers, we want our content to rank organically online. So we don't want to prevent it from existing, but we want to understand it and understand how it affects our metrics and performance in businesses.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different types, like you mentioned, of invalid traffic that could be mucking up your metrics and your mechanisms. Audiences, CDP segments, CRMs, they're all getting, bombarded with this invalid traffic if you are letting it pass. But I think the next slide that we have on here is invalid traffic by industry. I want to know from you is, how much of your own website traffic could be invalid? And, I see that it also obviously depends on the industry too, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, so on average, we see about 12% of all traffic landing on a business's website to be invalid. But of course, that can vary widely depending on what type of business you are, the audiences you serve, the regions you operate in, even the way that you go to market and how you bring traffic to your site, whether or not like you're using paid marketing, affiliates, all of that can affect the composition of fake traffic on your site. So that 12% number is on average across all the business sites that we monitor and protect. And there is, you can be more or less likely depending on what industry you operate in, but there are a variety of different reasons why a business can have a higher or lower percent of invalid traffic than what you see here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating. The gambling spike is definitely something. I think that most of our audience, we're probably not in the gambling sector, so that's good news for us. But, it's still something to be aware of. And I think, given the spread of invalid traffic across industries, do you think that there has been a rise in businesses being more concerned about invalid traffic?
It really depends. So some audiences are certainly more familiar with invalid traffic than others. And as you see, like some businesses are just more susceptible to higher invalid traffic rates than others. It really just depends how aware a particular business or a person at that business may be. I think as marketers, it's important that we understand the issue and don't wait until it presents as an issue to understand it. But really, like it kind of just depends, right? If somebody's encountered an issue before or operated in a space that has a higher prevalence of it, they can certainly be more aware of it.
Yeah. Is that an issue that you encountered before really joining CHEQ?
Yeah, so I was certainly aware of invalid traffic, but to be fair, I think probably like a lot of marketers, I hadn't spent a lot of time focusing on it. It never really presented itself in an obvious way at any of the businesses I've been a part of. Thank goodness, right? You don't want to wait for an attack or an issue to really start to understand and diagnose it. But because of that, I wasn't as knowledgeable probably as I should have been. I also was never a high spender on paid media, and sometimes paid media, like certain, engaging in certain types of paid media or doing paid media at a high volume of spend can bring in more invalid traffic than other sources. And so I was never really a big spender, and I was certainly aware of click fraud and the issue existing, but because I wasn't a big spender and I never encountered an issue, I was a lot less aware of it than certainly I am now.
Yeah. And has there been anything that has been especially surprising to you, either within the marketing industry, but also just in general, like as you navigate the world and you're so hyper aware of invalid traffic, like you just like go on websites and you're like, that's invalid traffic. That's invalid traffic.
Yeah, well, I mean, so two things really have surprised me being in this space now, right? So the first is the amount of different forms of invalid traffic and the ways it can affect a marketing org, go-to-market teams, and even a business's reputation. One thing that certainly created much more awareness about the issue in the last year is the Ticketmaster Taylor Swift fiasco.
Oh, yeah.
It made everybody hyper aware of the negative effect bots can have on a website, on a user's experience on your site. And now, I mean, it's wild, but we're about to see this issue become likely a federal antitrust case. Like it's really, in its most severe forms, it really can affect not just the marketing org, but the entire reputation of a business. I think something interesting that we talk about internally at CHEQ and share with some of our customers is even a year before that Ticketmaster Taylor Swift fiasco, PayPal actually encountered something similar when they discovered 4.5 million fake accounts had been created specifically for the purpose of exploiting their, $5 and $10 sign-up incentives. And that issue once it was announced, caused their stock to drop 25% within 24 hours. And so I think what's like, obviously, you don't want to wait for an issue to get that bad to start to understand and diagnose it. And hopefully something that severe never happens to any of our businesses. But there are minor incidents like that to severe incidents that happen every day that sometimes we do encounter. And I think that's what's been really surprising to me. The second thing that's probably more closer to home for us as B2B marketers is just how much invalid traffic can fluctuate across our own sites. And so in that industry average slide, you can see that for tech, 20% on average of our traffic can be invalid. But that fluctuation on our site, I think, is what's really interesting.
Yeah. And that actually, so that's this next slide here. I thought that this was, when you showed me this, I thought this was super interesting because it really shows just how many different areas that it can affect and really kind of mess up our data. I mean, this is the website is your digital footprint. And if you don't have a wrangle on all of the traffic that's coming in and you aren't able to identify, bots or those with malicious intent, like it can really mess up everything for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess the question that I have for you too is, not only is this a little scary, but, we don't want to cause any fear for those listening. So I think, if you could help explain this a little bit more, where did this data come from? And then the next question is, where does this invalid traffic come from? Like you had mentioned channels a little bit earlier. So if you could go into a little bit more detail on that too, that'd be great.
Yeah. So this slide actually shows real data from a popular B2B SaaS client of ours. And you can see that in total, their overall invalid traffic rate is really similar to what we see across all of our tech clients. Roughly 20% of traffic coming to their site is invalid. For them, it's about 18%. But what is most interesting is you can see the pages on their site and how invalid traffic affects different pages and different sections differently, right? And so the homepage has relatively low invalid traffic at about 10%. They have this product overview page that's 52% invalid. And then we did find out when we started to study some of this data with the client, one of their newer industry pages that they had launched was about 90% invalid. And then two blogs that they posted in a given month had one had a 12% invalid rate and one had 40%. And I think what's interesting and important to understand is the impact that that has on all of your site metrics and also the decisions that you make on those site metrics. So, you know, as marketers, we are often looking at page views to determine things like what organic posts and content to put paid dollars behind. If I don't know that one blog post has 40% invalid traffic and another blog post has 12%, I may think that that blog post with 40% invalid traffic actually has more page views and is the better post to put traffic behind. But when I start to understand the invalid rate, I may decide to prioritize other content, right? It also, when you start to think about when you remove invalid traffic from the site or you remove it from your metrics view, how that affects conversion rates on the site, right? And so we may think that, you know, one page is doing great with a 2 or 3% conversion rate, and this other page is not doing well at all with, you know, less than a 1% conversion rate. But when you remove fake traffic from the view, you can start to understand what the true conversion rate is. Once you remove fake traffic, maybe that page that only had a 1% conversion rate actually has a better conversion rate than you thought. And so I think the skewing of the data really can cause us to make decisions that are kind of misinformed, and it can send us, you know, in the wrong direction for where we put our paid dollars or how we optimize the site. I think you asked me also about why different about like the, you know, why this happens, right? And it really depends. There's usually not a universal answer that as to why, like, one page will have more invalid traffic than another. But, you know, sometimes a company is driving a lot of traffic to a particular page from paid media. They're using affiliates. Sometimes they're using influencers, which can sometimes present as higher invalid rates. Sometimes it's hard to understand why. It seems like all things are created equal, but maybe a pricing page has really high invalid rates, and that can be a signal that a competitor is you know, regularly scraping that page for information. It really depends, and sometimes it can be hard to understand, but I think what's important is understanding how it exists and persists across your site and the fluctuation in those rates, so you're able to make better decisions based on it.
Yeah, this is great. I think that it's nice to, I think like we had said at the start, you know, this is just something that people and we just need to be aware of, right? Because I think that the sooner that we can shine a light on what these things are, rather than just do a mass block and delete and don't even think about it, you know, the smarter we can be with not only how we're addressing the issues, but also how we are analyzing the data that these issues may persist in. So you had mentioned a few of those impacts, you know, from, you know, spending a lot of money and maybe, you know, inflating certain performance over others and giving us the wrong impression of things. And so what I want to cover next is the impacts of invalid traffic and some of the ways that it can manifest, to dive a little bit deeper. And so, you know, this was from CHEQ's fake traffic report of this year. I thought it was super fascinating to read through, honestly, because you just really get a very big sense of all of the ways that invalid traffic can impact your marketing organization. And so what my next question for you is, and Amy, is then, can you talk a little bit more about these ways that this can impact your go-to-market if left unchecked?
Yeah, certainly. So these are some of the most common ways we see invalid traffic impacting a go-to-market organization. But this is just a sampling of kind of 5 common ways. There are many other ways, and I'm sure as people are tuning in, they're thinking of the other downstream effects.
There's someone on their computer right now just listening to this, like running out the door to be like, oh my gosh, I gotta fix this. I know what the problem is.
Or they're just tuning out saying, I don't even want to know. You know what?
Don't be that person. Don't be that person.
So like I mentioned, one of the ways it affects the go-to-market org is that skewing of metrics, right? And it's hard to understand exactly how it may skew the metrics without actually being able to see it and having it in your analytics instance and or your other data. But that skewing of metrics really kind of destroys the data integrity and can wreak havoc on the decision-making process, right? When you don't understand it. Another way that we see it affect go-to-market organizations is really in wasted spend. So obviously, when invalid traffic isn't detected, you can be spending ad dollars and retargeting dollars to bring in bots and then continue to retarget bots or fake users that will have absolutely no ability to convert. And that inflates both your advertising bills, as well as when you're bringing those in and they are submitting fake leads, fake form submits and fake leads. It can also inflate tech bills once that data enters your system and starts to get into your other systems. And sometimes we see this happen in mass, and it can really drive up the cost of technology. It also can lead to increased tension between sales and marketing and kind of destroy trust. Obviously, with invalid traffic can come invalid leads, which can distract go-to-market teams from real interested buyers and prospects. And it can decrease response times and success metrics when you're distracted by fake leads. And so ultimately that can cause friction between the teams and really start to erode trust. And then we mentioned this earlier, can create a competitive disadvantage. Your competitors may mask their presence on your site as kind of invalid traffic, and they can look for ways to gain access to sensitive information and prevent real customers from getting access to that information. And then finally, and one of the primary reasons we see some businesses signing up for CHEQ are the security risks that it presents, and in addition to really making it more difficult for marketing to understand the data and go to market in an effective way and potentially wasting advertising dollars. It really can prevent real security risks for a business. And it can, it can threaten customer data. It can jeopardize the experience for actual valid visitors, and it can expose a business just to unnecessary risk, like what we saw with the Ticketmaster example and even the PayPal example.
Yeah, prevents people from getting their very precious Eras Tour tickets.
Exactly.
Not speaking from personal experience. But well, this is great. Thank you so much, Amy, for going through this. I think this has been such a great discussion. I'm genuinely fascinated by this stuff. I think that this was really fun for me to research before, putting this presentation together with you. So we are coming to an end, but before we do, I want to make sure that I remind everyone to please complete a little session survey, which you can access in your console. We'll send you a little thank you gift. These responses also really help us improve the types of events that we put on. So thank you for doing that. And to wrap up this session, I think it would be really great to give our audience some tips to help them address or at least be aware of the issues that are caused by invalid traffic. So let's talk about warning signs, because I know that it's a little bit tricky, with finding this is the hard and fast solution to preventing a very, very prevalent problem.
Yeah. So some of the ways you can start to tell if you have an issue or how significant your issue is, hopefully before it becomes a major issue, is you may see abnormal traffic patterns across the site. You may see an increase in traffic from certain regions that you don't operate in. You might start to see really wide fluctuations in your conversion rates across your site or on certain pages. Sometimes you will experience like a slight slowness and a lag in the site experience. Sometimes you'll see a spike in bad leads coming in through either one form or forms across your entire site, and you don't know what's driving that spike in fake leads, which is scary. And then you also can start to see ad budgets sometimes become depleted more quickly than usual. And I'd say any of those, or really anything that seems atypical across your site or your metrics, can be a signal that there's a higher prevalence of invalid traffic than you've previously experienced, or that there's a spike in suspicious or malicious traffic on your site.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have any other places that, once someone starts to identify these warning signs, anywhere that you would recommend that they start?
So two things. One, you can always talk to your IT or security teams. Some IT and security teams have measures in place to detect or prevent invalid traffic. And so you can always have a conversation with your security team. I think there's a delicate balance between marketing and security. Sometimes security may say that to prevent it, they want to block all forms of invalid traffic, which we do know that some forms are actually good and beneficial to a business. And so you want to talk to your security team, but you also want to make sure that you're not overcorrecting for some of these issues, right? And then the other place, not to seem completely self-serving, but the other place you could start, it's really hard to detect this without having a technology in place. And so CHEQ does offer free website health scans. You can request a demo or health scan on our site. Our team will set you up with a tag for your site that measures the prevalence of invalid traffic by type and threat group for a trial period. And you can request a trial at any time through our site.
Oh yeah, I love that. We will put that, that's in the resources below. So that anyone that does want to take a look at that, you can definitely do so. But I think, ultimately, Amy, if you could just give us some, a nice little reminder that, this isn't meant to be something that we want to instill fear in our audience, right? This is invalid traffic is not anything to be afraid of, right?
Right. Well, we hope it's not, right? But typically, you want to understand it, right? And by understanding it, you can be more efficient. You can make much better decisions, and you can prevent some issues from becoming real problems for the business and for the business's reputation.
Amazing. Well, Amy, this has been fantastic. Really loved our conversation today. Thank you for everyone for joining us for today's session. That is all the time that we have. But we hope that you enjoyed your time at the Checkpoint Summit. Thank you for joining us for today. And hopefully we will see you all again very soon. But we hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thank you again.